For 20 years, when I was in the House of Representatives, I had been working on the issue of Iran when people were not paying attention. And no one wants the president to succeed more on achieving an agreement than I do. However, it is not just any agreement. It has to be an agreement that significantly moves Iran in a different direction. Now, Secretary Blinken, for the purposes of our colleagues here who don't sit on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, last week under testimony, you said, in response to my question, that, look, this is no longer about dismantling Iran's nuclear infrastructure. This is about getting, at best, or maybe better, a one-year alarm bell. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Senator. The critical test is whether we reach an agreement that makes sure that it would take them at least 1 year to produce enough fissile material for one nuclear weapon.
So we get an alarm bell, but we don't dismantle Iran's illicit nuclear infrastructure. And I say illicit not just by U.S. standards, but by international standards of Security Council resolutions. So let me just say, you spent a lot of time on perceptions, and last week I made a statement that I think wasn't taken in full context. The context is, the more that I hear these arguments, the more concerned I am that we feed into the narrative that Iran is the victim when Iran has original sin here by having an illicit nuclear program. So, but let me talk to you about perceptions. You spent all of your testimony talking about Iran's perceptions. Well, let me tell you what some of us perceive here in the United States of America. Number one is, you see that the Iranians have a way to cheat, and technically they're not in the joint plan of action. So they cheated, and we, the United States, complained to the UN Security Council about violations of Iran trying to buy technology for what? For the Iraq nuclear reactor. They cheated when they fueled one of their centrifuges. They cheated when you, Mr. Cohen, last week in testimony said that among the 100 times that you have sanctioned different entities, some of those times Iran was complicit with those who you sanctioned. So they're cheating in the midst of our negotiations. Now, in addition to that, we talk about the Congress forbearing. Well, right now in Tehran, there is legislation pending to deploy centrifuges that can enrich uranium more efficiently than ever, to increase the production of a form of nuclear fuel that is just shy of bomb-grade material. The Ayatollah has been talking about a resistance economy. And last week, the person who we've got a lot of faith in, the Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif, said at the World Economic Forum that the global drop in the price of oil makes Iran less likely to agree to concessions on their nuclear program. Less likely to agree to concessions. So I don't know about you, but all of that put together and so much more says to me, my perception here in the United States of America is that your aspirations, which I share for, but I have mine dosed in a lot of reality, because I don't want another North Korea. Now, what you're really telling us when I hear your worries about what the Iranian perception is that, in fact, they're unlikely to make a deal. Because if I, the Ayatollah, who's going to make this ultimate decision, think that a deal is good for me and my regime to stay in place, I'm going to make it regardless of what the noise or the action is over here, especially action that wouldn't take place until after June, when you're supposed to have a deal fully consummated. Now, that's not going to stop me from making a deal that I otherwise want to make. It's just counterintuitive. So, look, I think you need to be looking at what Iran is doing right now. And I'll just close by saying, you know, Iran can cheat, but we don't worry about that in the context of, you know, unsettling the joint plan of action, because technically it's not within it. But it's great if you can cheat outside of the joint plan of action and get away with it. I'm sure if we heard from the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Israelis, and others, that they'd have a different view than the ambassadors that you have mentioned. I know that we have heard many times before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, when I was a member and when I chaired it, and even most recently, that in fact the world will come to an end. Don't have sanctions. You're just going to split our coalition. You're going to drive the Iranians. And now the administration heralds it as the singular reason why, in fact, the Iranians are finally coming to a negotiation. And just about every sanctions that we have passed legislatively have needed 6 months to ultimately be invoked, and of course, more time to feel a consequence. There have been 1 or 2 that were done more quickly, but overwhelmingly they needed 6 months. So the time to implement any sanctions, assuming a deal doesn't work, is going to take a lead time of 6 months. Well, testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee indicates that the Iranian ability to pass the nuclear threshold is well below the 6 months. So those sanctions are inconsequential. And that's why some of us feel that the prospective nature of something that would not affect the deal that the Ayatollah wants to make is a guarantee that if they don't make it, we don't have the only option being, my God, they're going to cross the threshold. We either have to have a military strike or accept a nuclear-armed Iran. That is not a choice that we want to have. Thank you.